with everybody? Okay. All right. So our session is being recorded, just so everybody is aware. Good morning. Happy end of fall and early happy holidays. I know that we're all at different stages for prepping for spring, so we do want to use our time to the most effectiveness this morning. The attachments that we're going to review are in our Google invite, and I believe they were emailed out as well, but I will share my screen when we get there. Our primary focus is planning our next professional development. Again, Demetria, thank you so much for being our speaker in November. That was lovely. Thank you so much. So we have a list of topics that came out of Disability in a Day feedback. So it's slightly old, but I think between those topics and the survey responses that we got, we may be able to find some top priorities for a professional development in January. And then maybe even some topics that we want to set aside or start thinking about for Disability in a Day. So if everybody can look at that, I'm going to pull up the hopefully right tab. Nope. This one. All right. So can everybody see that?
Yep, it's there.
Okay, thank you. So this is the professional development topics from our session, Disability in a Day. Initially, back in November, I narrowed these down to like the top 8 that we had talked about informally, and that seemed to be hot topics in the community. But I wanted to give you guys the full list because we have not only this professional development to plan in January, early February. We'll likely do one more March, April, and then we have Disability in a Day. So we can kind of think about the top 5 that we like and then prioritize one of those for each of those topics or a few of those for each of those topics. So I'm just going to read through them and then kind of open the floor for feedback or ideas on what you guys think is most impactful. Emotional support animals and their limitations under the law, OCR process, utilization of peer note takers versus software, pros and cons, panel discussion. I think we did that recently, but a panel discussion, how to work with faculty, how to support student accommodation requests, how to help instructors help their students, more topics on visual impairments, supporting college students' specific learning disabilities, more opportunities to share creative solutions, how to support reasonable accommodations, helping parents, counselors, AVP of high school, homeschool, understand the difference, transition between college and high school accommodations, assistive technology tools. This isn't necessarily a professional development, but some feedback on the community college system working with OCR education to support us, which we're going to talk about, our orientation ideas that Trudy is thinking through. Bringing up discussion about wider disability services in the community and how to refer sources and build a larger campus community that's accessible and build upon accessible practices. So kind of a framework of how we could pull in more people across campus thinking about accessibility. Learning bridges between institutional disability services and disability justice movement. I haven't read through that one recently, so I'm just trying to make sense of it. Finding a way to encourage disability services and professionals to engage in more excellent topics of exploration. Policy implementation, self-advocacy, which we did, which was great. Orientation, which we're going to talk about. Best practices from intake to accommodation. How to get instructors who are hesitant in giving accommodations on board. So buy-in from instructors and helping them with captioning and course accessibility. Online reasonable accommodations. So in the world of COVID, how did we shift? Collaboration to create technical standards, which I believe we covered in a panel recently. which we could always go over again. It's a great topic. And best practices providing accommodations. So there's a lot of best practices, references. There's a lot of how to support faculty in supporting building the accommodations or that interactive process. The other one that was fairly common is specific learning disabilities, so visual impairments or specific learning disabilities, and then how to implement specific accommodations like assistive technology or note takers. Any other themes that you guys see than what I just mentioned? I see assistive technology / implement accommodations.
You know, Megan, if I can put my 2 cents in, I know we've done a lot on learning disabilities. Holly just had, I can't remember her name, when we had her for Disability Week, a guest speaker, professor at, I think, UNC or is it NC State? I can't remember.
NC State came to the last disability in a day.
Yeah, and she's presented for us twice on that, and then she presented the same stuff for the NC Ahead. So I feel like that information has already been out there.
Right.
I know we haven't done anything on visual, but we certainly have done quite a bit, I think, for learning disabilities. I mean, there's never not too much information. There's never that. But I just feel like that's been addressed. I could be wrong.
Yeah. So I was kind of pulling 4 themes together: assistive technology / implementing accommodations, supporting faculty at implementing accommodations, overall accessibility, so building an accessible campus, visual impairments as a topic, maybe assistive technology around visual impairments, and then some best practices, whether that's intake or implementing specific accommodations. In the survey results, I was reviewing those yesterday and again this morning. There is a lot. This one does not look pretty, but I'll not share that right now. There are a lot of trends and themes in the survey responses around anxiety and mental health care. Students impacted by COVID or just life in general, having the need for accommodations around mental health resources. And then a lot of conversation about absenteeism and students not really just requesting accommodations due to absenteeism, but how our colleges are responding to students' absenteeism. So that was what I got from themes that I got from our survey from last year, and then the survey that we did recently. Any thoughts, guys, on what you think as a professional would be most impactful at providing, or what topic you think would be most interesting for January, February professional development?
May I?
Yes.
One of the things that, and I saw you doing the same thing again, is when we were talking about assistive technology centering around a specific disability like visual impairment. But assistive technology is available for all disabilities, especially learning disabilities, to make it easier. And when I talk about assistive technology with my instructors, I always push, there is assistive technology to help your student with dyslexia and so on and so forth. Could we kind of broaden that approach on assistive technology away from just visual impairment or just hearing impairment to learning disabilities? Because that has not been brought up, not that I have run across anywhere.
Right. I know that we have, I think that's a great recommendation. We have a module in the Disability Academy that does some high-level introduction to different assistive technologies. And I've seen that done at the national level before, where there's a session that does, it was obviously promoting a specific product, but in the midst of them promoting their specific product. They also talked about a variety of other assistive technologies. And so we could fashion a professional development about common assistive technology tools and who they would be most useful for. And that might also be a really good tie-in for orientation. We could possibly record it, and that could be the session for new professionals to have kind of a crash course, if you will, in assistive technology. I know there's a lot of variety in assistive technology, but there's those categories, you know, like CCTVs, dictation tools, read aloud tools. And we could do a brief introduction to maybe one or two of those softwares or tools, and then who it would be most impactful for and how that's helpful. I don't know if that's too elementary for the large group, but I think it would be really helpful for the new beginners. Where do you guys think that would be a good topic?
I think if we also combine that with how to train your teacher on that would make it really effective. Not only introducing the tool, but also how to introduce it as the professional that has to do it to the instructor, to the faculty. Because that's where a lot of times I've seen the breakdowns, not only here, but also in other colleges.
Can you tell me more about the situation where you'd be introducing the tool to faculty? Typically, I just introduce tools to students. So I want to understand more about a situation where you'd be introducing tools to faculty.
Okay. If you're using an assistive technology in a classroom, for instance, and the teacher does not understand what that assistive technology is for and what it can do to enhance his or her instruction to the students, then you're basically having a disconnect.
Okay.
That means the teacher might not be able to present a lesson in a way that it would be at 100% benefit for the student, for instance.
Okay.
Like if you're talking for a visually impaired person, you're talking at a Zoom text, okay, on a laptop, okay? Well, the teacher can do certain things to make it easier for the student to understand the lesson. You know, it might have caught all of the points on ADA compliance, but the lesson itself does not lend itself to be easily understood that way, with enough pauses in it and things like that to make it easy for a student.
Right,
So
right.
if we could get that together, how do you tell the teacher what something is good for and how can it be good for the teacher to help with that, then I think we would be doing also much better.
Yeah. So some value statements about, like, for instance, CCTV. I'm implementing that in January for a student, and the faculty member, I'm going to talk to them about pausing between examples so that the student can take a screenshot and scan the page and then move on, giving them a minute or two between mathematic examples to engage in using their technology. So I think that I get what you're saying now. I just wanted to put in more context, kind of the value that you wanted to add to that. So
I'm kind of hard to explain things sometimes.
yeah. So introduction of the tool, overview of a variety of tools, the role that it can serve to the student, and the value it can add to the instructor, and how they can support their class to add value to that tool. Yeah.
Can I think that's a great topic. It seems really broad for a month, or for like maybe for disability in a day. That would be a great topic for a breakout session. And I'm not in any way, please don't think that I'm shooting. I'm not. I think me personally I would get overwhelmed maybe in a short session if there was that much information. And I'm not saying it's not great.
Yeah.
Information that I would personally need, but in a breakout or in our smaller sessions, it could be a lot, maybe.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, you make a good point. Our January sessions are typically 40 to 50 minutes, whereas disability in a day could lend itself to a solid hour and a half breakout session where there could be two topics going on and people could choose between one or the other.
And in a smaller group, there could be more discussion, where if you had everyone, it may not lend to that. And that worries me.
Right. Well, I definitely think that it's valuable. And by no means do we have to come to a final decision today. I just want to kind of get ideas. So I think that's a great session that we can kind of blueprint out, and maybe write some key topics down, like what assistive technology would be most valuable to review, and then kind of build out that rubric to see if it's a 50-minute session or an hour and a half session. So anybody want to work with me on that over the next, period of time, however long?
Do you mind if I throw my hat in the ring?
Of course not.
I was going to say, this is Holly. I was going to say, I think those are great ideas, Marguerite. And, like I put in the comments, if we really want to make what we're going to present effective and beneficial and worth our colleagues' time, we might consider, you've got great ideas. And in that outline, if you were to put it into 2 to 3, PD sessions in a row, so that we can advertise it that way to our group, and then they can really be prepared and hopefully really get more out of the good content.
Mm-hmm.
And then that covers us for 2 to 3 PD sessions out, instead of just meeting monthly and planning, a month or so in advance.
Right. So kind of categorizing a few topics around assistive technology, CCTVs, or read aloud tools in one session, and then adaptive equipment and dictation tools in another PD session.
One of the other tools that I use a lot with the students and with the instructors here is supportive things like Grammarly. Okay, when I first started letting the students use Grammarly in my classroom, it was like you letting them cheat. They're not cheating by using Grammarly, but that was the English instructor's first thing. Well, they're going to cheat. But if they use it often and long enough, it becomes second nature what Grammarly is trying to tell them. And they actually use it without Grammarly really being there.
Right.
So if we could do maybe a little introduction or something on just free things that are out there to support a student's grammar, a student's spelling, word search, even with math, there are things out there that are free on the internet. You can buy the expensive stuff, but you don't have to, that a student readily can access, and when they leave us, still use to be the profession that we want them to be.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of different ways we could go about it, and in dividing it up into 2 or 3 sessions, we could definitely cover a lot of different valuable tools that are out there. So I agree that that's definitely something. Maybe I can, if you guys want to help me again, and you kind of plan out that session. If there's a valuable tool that you know about that you don't think other people would know about, send me an email of a list of common stuff that you're using. And then once I have that list, we can kind of categorize it out into a few different common categories, and then break that out into 2 or 3 sessions. And that would pretty much plan our spring. Even if the last one is part of disability in a day, we could do January, February, March, April, and then disability in a day. And that would really add value. We would cover the gamut of assistive technology. I know there's a few people as well at the state level, vocational rehabilitation, obviously very familiar with some assistive technology. And then I forget the name of it, but the assistive technologist at the state who often coordinates with vocational rehabilitation to coordinate students having assistive technology at home. They may also have, I'll have to hunt down that contact. I called them like 2 or 3 years ago. If anybody knows who I'm talking about, please put it in the chat. My brain is blank with what I'm thinking of, but they may also be able to add some value by telling us how they can support our students at home. I know that there's this balance in assistive technology and software that, yes, I think so, that there is a balance between what we can send home for them and what we keep on campus. And that kind of dichotomy, less so now that COVID has happened. But especially prior to COVID, there was a lot of things that I could install in the software here on the campus, but I couldn't always readily send it home with the student. But I think that's a great topic. So I would really like some help, Marguerite. I appreciate your help. If anybody else wants to send me an email with some common assistive technology tools that they use, we can break that down, plan for January, February. I mean, I'm saying like late January, early February, late March, early April for our PD sessions.
If I could interject too, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, Megan. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
Renee Macemore from Wilson, I don't want to volunteer her for anything, but I'm sure she'd be happy. But she was the one that wrote the that module, so she might be really interested in. We could reach out to her. And Maggie, we definitely want Maggie Morley to present as well. Renee might be a good resource as well, but also Kit Gowan from Guilford Tech. He does the assistive technology and for visual disabilities, because he's visually impaired. Okay, so he might be somebody to reach out to, and we've had him present before in our Disability in a Day conference. And same, Rebecca Sitton is always the master. She always presents for us too. So that might be another resource. I don't know if she'd do it for just for a webinar, but she certainly would be a consideration for our Disability in a Day. Those are just my thoughts, and I'll be quiet. Okay.
No, I like that a lot. I think we could probably see who has what and who has what experience, and then maybe have them co-host, like the module on visual impairment. Kit could do a module, a session that Renee's familiar with could do. Maggie talking about the free resources and the resources that you were talking about potentially doing. I have a lot, because I think demoing them to a certain extent might be valuable. So if they have it on their campus, then they could show us how they use it. For instance, I have Equatio and Read and Write here at CC that I would be happy to demonstrate and kind of show you guys the value of that. So there's a few different sessions and a few different options. So we'll get that nailed down via email. In terms of any other topics that we like for, again, just a preliminary brainstorm on Disability in a Day, because I know last year we were kind of working towards guest speakers and it worked out, but there was a period of time where we weren't sure if we could pull any guest speakers. So if there are any topics, the other ones that we mentioned, supporting faculty and implementing accommodations, overall accessibility and best practices and intake or accommodation, or any other topics that seem to be emerging in our communities, that we could preliminarily start thinking about for Disability in a Day. Any thoughts?
I think the best practices is always good to hit for Disability in a Day. I think that's the one time in a year we can come together as a group and really discuss how we can be as uniform as possible. That way, if I have a student leave me and move across the state and go to your school, Megan, then they're going to get continuance of care that is appropriate at that point.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I like that. So would that be general best practices, intake, accommodation? Do you think there's something specific that we should hit on and kind of drill down on that hasn't been discussed recently?
I like the idea of intake. And this is, again, I'm just speaking completely 100%.
Yeah, no, that's what we want.
Being able to see what your intake or what Marguerite's intake or what Holly's intake looks like compared to what I'm doing. I think it would be what our accommodation letters look like, even those kind of things, just to make sure. I mean, when I was teaching K-12, the IEP was the IEP. And there may be a different software writing it in every school system, but the IEP itself was the same. And I think that would be kind of a cool thing to look at together. Maybe.
Right. Absolutely. I like that.
I also have an idea, and I love that idea, Jason. I think you're right on target on that. What about during our Disability in a Day, having a breakout sessions with just the regions. I know the Western region, Heather Pack did a really good job doing the Western, but to my knowledge, and I could be wrong, to my knowledge, they're the only ones that have done a meeting so far, a virtual meeting, and it was fantastic. I mean, she did a great job. She surveyed ahead of time some questions, and they really had a wealth of information. It was a phenomenal meeting. So maybe we just have some time for regional meetings. I don't know. I don't want to segregate people, but it's just a thought.
Yeah, I think that could add value, especially if it could be in addition to the regional meeting that some people will have in spring, or if we're in person, then that would be one of the first times that many people will see each other in person in at least a while. And again, we don't know, and we probably won't know until March or April if it's even possible to have something in person, or where that would be. I know we talked last year, since I think it was Renee had planned for it to happen at Wilkes, that we were continuing with that same idea that if it was going to be in person, it would potentially be at Wilkes Community College. So again, we'll plan that more thoroughly in January, February, but that's kind of the theme I remember. So I think best practices, one great session. I like the idea of reviewing accommodation plan structures, because I think everybody's accommodation plans have evolved differently over the years based on what questions you get from faculty and what your upper administration kind of expects. So getting some shared ideas there could be really great. I hesitate in calling it best practices, because if we all share our examples, it just is best practice for us. But I would definitely not want to sound pretentious and say that mine is any better than any of yours, or vice versa. But then a regional breakout session, and then would we continue the OCR presentation, or would we look for another source of legal counsel or legal updates? I remember us having a conversation about that last year, but
I think we still can contact Judy, and I think we don't want to cut those ties, and I think people get a lot out of that. Because I had a conversation after one of our last things with her, and she said, "Oh, Trudy, you can always call me, and I can certainly do this." So I don't really want to get away from that. But I think it's more helpful when we have Judy. Just even though she's not our direct contact, she can be though. So
yeah.
I don't want to stop doing that.
Yeah. Holly, I agree. Thank you, Trudy. I agree. I just wasn't sure where we left that after last year. Rise, I'm still not, I will admit that is a limit to my knowledge. Definitely. Should we do a session on Rise specifically and the impact of the comprehensive intakes, or is that part of the best practices reference that you were tying into, Holly?
Part of the best practices just kind of tie into, I think it could be beneficial to just kind of do an overview, a short overview of Rise, at some point coming into and using that as, because of this, here are some things that we'd really like to share that could benefit the entire group and how things might change because of it. NC Ahead did one on Rise. I believe that was one of our October sessions. So the information is out there, and there's definitely a good group within the system who have a fairly good understanding of it or what the impact might be. But I think we're all beginning to see that impact. So while we can't change that, what we can focus on is what we can do to best support our own offices and our students. And to Jason's point, being as consistent, if that's the right word, as possible.
Right.
But isn't Rise being I'm sorry, isn't RISE being replaced with code or whatever the new acronym is at some point now? I got an email from someone recently. Am I not supposed? I don't know.
I don't know.
I just got an. I don't know. Sorry, I didn't mean to overstep if that's not the thing yet, but I got an email recently. What was it? I've got it pulled up here. Sorry, forgive me.
You're okay.
Co-requisite and development education, formerly known as RISE. I guess I don't know. There. I just saw. I got something from my supervisor from who had received something from somewhere else.
That's testing. Okay, I know what you're talking about now, Jason. That's yeah, why can't we stay away from the same acronyms? But no, the RISE that you're talking about is like the placement testing model that we've worked under for a couple of years.
Sorry, I was mistaken. Wrong RISE. You're right. Sorry.
Okay. But they're both RISE, so you're not wrong about that. It's just confusing.
Is there someone at the system office that you think would pull in good content with how RISE impacts disability, or do you think there is and then, again, I know this is a very preliminary conversation, so I don't mean to get so specific. Would it be a professional in disability services, or would we be looking for someone that's more familiar with the RISE program to do that part?
Now, which RISE are we talking about? Because I'm confused too, because the RISE used to be Susan Barbito with the CCR, the co-requisite model, or are we talking about the other RISE that Holly's talking about, that they talked about recently?
I think our focus is more on the legislative RISE, because that's what has an impact on us and what we do. Not that the other with testing does not, but, and maybe that's just for me, but I don't have really much of anything to do with that at the college, placement and all that. So I'm referencing, like Tree said, more the legislative RISE about more generalized documentation to support students with accommodation.
Yes. Monica just did our breakout session for NC Ahead. Was Monica chose that as our topic, and we talked a lot about that recently. We looked at the legislation together and talked through that. So I'm now on point with you. I was confused as well. I thought we were talking about the testing, but you're talking about legislation. So the RISE Act, I think that could be a really good topic. And to my knowledge, it hasn't been passed yet. It's still a proposed law, but if it is passed, then we would have a certain amount of time to make some substantial changes to all of that. So yes, definitely, that is on my topic list.
I'm happy to reach out to somebody if there's a contact name that I need to reach out to see about that, to learn more. But I don't, on that RISE, I didn't see a real, the legislature RISE, I didn't see a contact, but I'm happy to help and find and arrange that, but somebody knows.
I think the National Center for Learning Disabilities, and I could be totally wrong on this, I'll have to look back in my email, they are supporting the bill, and so they've put their organization behind the bill. It's just another option on who we might be able to ask a question of. Laura, I don't want to miss your suggestion. Nursing students, yes, absolutely on my list. Nursing students and accommodating people in health science programs with technical standards. That is always a very delicate, interactive process that I think would, if we could, would be worthy of conversation.
And I can certainly get Lori, Dr. Bird from the system office to talk about that if you want, because I'm always in communication with her. She's over the nursing department. So
And I don't have my book with me right now, but I know I've talked to some of you about that book before, and I'm sure some of you have seen the book, but that accommodation book that Nancy wrote 2 years ago, that's on the second edition, about how to accommodate students in the nursing program, has a phenomenal framework inside that book that I've actually made copies of and taken to meetings before. Yes, to show faculty that this is the rubric that we have to follow. This is the value. I'll send it to you, Laura. I'll send you the link for the book and the book club that has great discussion questions. If anybody else wants that, please let me know. But the book goes through a phenomenal rubric on how to consider accommodations in health science programs, what questions we have to answer within the law. And then it goes in later chapters into specific scenarios around best practices, OCR findings, court findings, and really helping nursing professionals and disability service providers think not so much about the what, because the what sometimes can't change, but the how we get there may sometimes need to be adapted.
Megan, will you just send me that link and I'll send it out to everybody? I'll send that to our CC list. I'm only going to include our ADA and our disability list, but I think everybody probably needs that.
Yeah.
And
I
I'll
will.
send
I will.
compliments of you.
Thanks. It may not be a replacement for that session, but I think it has been extremely valuable to me over the last 2 years as I've worked through with our vet med programs and our nurse and health science programs. So it could be valuable for all of us. And it may be that we could ask the author if we could do a short presentation, at least on their framework that they use, because it's literally a grid chart and a flow chart of questions and answers that kind of codifies the interactive process in such a way that it takes it off of us, and it shows that we're not just working out of our personal opinion or our professional preference, that this is the law and this is the case that we're working through. So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox. I love that book. But maybe that's something that we could use as reference for that professional development, or maybe some scenarios on how we have professionally worked through the interactive process with specific nursing students. I don't know, but it's on my list for topics. Anybody else have any other ideas? Anything that we haven't talked about? Anything that wasn't on the topic list or the survey that you guys think, I'm really still curious about this. I think other people might be curious about this.
Megan.
Yeah.
This is Alex. I just wanted to comment on the RISE amendment. We had that discussion at the NCA head meeting last month, and I kind of reached out to Monica afterward because I was curious about any comments that were going to legislation about our concerns, how that would impact our work. But she said that the national head has been, I guess, forwarding some information to express the concerns that we have as accessibility services staff, and how that would impact us, and how the accommodations and IEPs and I-4s, 504. So she said that they are working on submitting information to legislators to share how this impacts in a different way. So I was glad to hear that that's going on. So we need to contact our legislators to say, hey, this is great, but this is the other side of it. So
right.
Just want to let you know that I guess National Head is working on that.
I love that update, and that is very reassuring. I think there's value in what they're looking for to make it simpler and more transparent of a process. But I think we can all agree that sometimes the IEPs do not provide the information that we need. And I'll be honest, I just worked through a situation with a student who their documentation that supported their IEP said they don't have a disability. And I had to step back and say, okay, EC teacher, tell me more. Tell me more about what qualifying factors you're using. If there is any additional accommodation, are there any additional documentation? Like, where are we going with this? So anyway, I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that there's support on both sides, and that hopefully in time, maybe there'll be some encouragement for transparency, but support for ADA processes as well. Well, guys, any other thoughts, any other ideas for topics or sessions?
I don't have any other thoughts, but I just wanted to share really quick. Tuesday, Sigmund, some of you may know, has taken back her position as coordinator or director in disability services at Caldwell. And she has asked and would really like to rejoin this advisory board. So I don't know that there's any issue with that.
She was
And
invited to today's meeting and added
Yeah.
on the most recent outreach.
Awesome. And she texted me just earlier this morning and said to give her love and share happy holidays, but to be thinking about the Caldwell Tech community. They recently had a faculty die by suicide. And so she was short staffed and a little overwhelmed this morning and not able to join us. So be thinking about them.
I agree. Is there any other way that we could support each other in the time we have left?
So what are our next steps, Megan, for the January webinar? What would you like to do? What do I need to do to support?
I would really like to hear from everybody about what assistive technology they're using and what they find most valuable. If there's a list that you could rattle off in an email, just so in case you're using something that I'm not familiar with or Maggie's not familiar with, we can kind of create a master list. And from there, I want to divide them up into categories, and I can get that to you guys in early January. And then from there, we would work on assigning speakers to those categories and planning out what's going to be covered in each of our sessions throughout the spring semester. And we would kind of open it up to a few speakers that Trudy recommended, looking for volunteers, or if someone on the board would like to serve as a co-speaker on one of the topics, I would love to help with that. So I think that's our next step. You guys send me what assistive technology you're using, whether it's equipment, software, adaptive technology, or even creative solutions. I'll give an example that I used a few years ago. A nonverbal student who utilized a wheelchair typed with his nose on his iPad, and we had to work on a way for him to communicate mathematical calculations to his instructor to work out that communication and on adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing. And so we made a huge picture of a TI-83 calculator that he would indicate what number he wanted pushed or what button he wanted pushed. And his aide would type that in for him and then be able to communicate seamlessly between showing the instructor his skills and the aide doing the calculation and finalizing that homework. It took us a long time to get there. It worked very well for him for the class, the developmental math class that he was in at the time. We worked on more sophisticated technology as time went on and eventually moved over to Panther Math. But creative solutions like that are also things I would love to hear about, and how we have implemented assistive technology for our students. So if you have an example or a tool that you like, please email. You can email me and I will add it to the master list. And then again, I'll break that down early January. We'll look for some speakers and then plan that professional development from there. And Maggie, I want to talk to you as well. Maybe we can meet sometime this week or first week of January and talk to about the tools that you saw as well.
I like that idea, Megan. I really want Maggie to be involved and any other board members to present because you guys have great ideas and you're in a leadership role to everybody across the state as our advisory board. So I think it makes a very strong impact to see the advisory board presenting your knowledge and expertise.
Thank you, Trudy. Thank you. If you guys think of anything else, please send me an email. Topics for PD Day, and I'm sorry, Disability in a Day session in the summertime. We may also need some backup in helping coordinate that session, because I will possibly be on maternity leave during that time. So please be prepared to be tapped for that help. I'll reach out to you, Maggie, and we'll schedule something. But that's just tentative planning on my part. So we'll talk more in the spring about specifics. Anything else, guys? Everybody's.
Megan?
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Well, I have everybody on Teams. And it's about a nursing student. And if I could get some guidance from my colleagues, that would be wonderful.
Trudy, do you want to end the recording just so what Lauren is going to share is only with us, and that way, thank you.
I'm doing it hold on for just a second. Let me do it. Hold on.